Welcome back, everyone, to another Kitecast episode. I'm joined by my co-host, Tim Freestone. Tim, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm just counting the days to PTO. So 9 left.
Or the weekend. You're counting the hours in that case.
Yeah.
I promise not to schedule any podcast during your PTO. How's that?
Thanks.
We're in for a real treat today. We're going to do something a little bit different than we normally do. We just published, or by the time this podcast is released, we have an early version that all the participants on this call have obviously taken a look at, or you will discover. We're going to publish our third Sensitive Content Communications Privacy and Compliance Report. It's an annual report that delves into issues related to, you guessed it, data privacy and compliance, cybersecurity, and so forth. And we thought our audience would find an engaged conversation around some of the key insights. Obviously, we're not going to be able to cover all of them during this call. We'll just cover a few of the ones that we think are more salient to get expert input on some of those from a couple folks that we've had interactions with in the past. Alexandre Blanc is a former cybersecurity director at several companies. He is a consultant. He helps organizations with things such as ISO 27001, 27017, and so forth, MITRE attack framework, how to use it, as well as other cybersecurity and compliance initiatives. And then Ranbir Bhutani, he has years of experience in cybersecurity and compliance, including having served as a vCISO, and he is currently the CEO and vCISO at Cyberculture. He's also a PhD candidate at George Washington University. So, gentlemen, thanks for joining me today.
Nice to be there. Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm looking forward to this conversation and getting your insights as well as Tim's on, what some of the findings show us or maybe point to in terms of things that our audience members can be doing today when addressing cybersecurity and compliance challenges, as well as things they should be thinking about a year out or 2 years out, for example. The report, just for our audience, is conducted annually. We used a survey form, a company called Sentiment this go around. They did a great job. 572 responses from IT, cybersecurity, risk, and compliance leaders around the globe, I think across about 10 different countries. And the report is broken up into, it's about a 30-page report, has various charts and graphs. It's broken up into 5 different sections: cyber attacks and data breaches, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. There's some interesting findings there. Data types and classification. Third, compliance and risk. Third, cybersecurity and risk management. And finally, operational processes. We'll talk a little bit about some of those. We'll let our audience check out the report on their own to delve into some of those details, but there's some interesting insights there that we can cover today. So with that, we'll jump into the report. But before we do so, because we just got out of RSA a month ago or so, and we had the Verizon data breach investigations report come out. What are you guys seeing in 2024 when it comes to cybersecurity and compliance? Are there any trends? If we look at hacks, are there any trends there that we need to watch out for? Alexandre, let's start with you. What are you seeing?
Well, we see some. It's interesting because we see bigger incident, like less of them, but way bigger. Like the past years, we had many small businesses being attacked and stuff like that, and it seems that the threat actors did, get more organized and target bigger organization, and we have bigger impact from what I see right now. And they also target some specific vertical. We seems to see campaigns, toward like healthcare and then more financial stuff. And it's a very, very segmented. I think it goes together with the geopolitical tension. There is it's more used as an ammunition kind of. And the goal is to break the trust in our systems and organization and society. So that's what I see overall.
Interesting. And we certainly saw that with the Move It breach, the Go Anywhere breach to a lesser extent, where they were hitting hundreds of thousands of companies in the case of Move It and large organizations. And our research, ironically, shows that healthcare has a lot of work to do. And I'll throw out a few data points when we get down to some of those relevant sections in the discussion. Ranbir, when you're working with your clients, are you seeing something comparable to what Alexandre just referenced, or are you seeing something different?
No, actually, what Alexandre references is quite accurate. right? I would add again, can't share clients' information, but again, there are incidents that are happening where hackers are actually trying to get into clients' tenants, right? Because everything, pretty much most companies are all cloud-based, Google, AWS, Azure. So in this case, what they did is they actually got an account that was keys to the kingdom. Could have been maybe a potential insider threat. We don't know. But the idea is they got into their tenant. They luckily they didn't mess with their environments, but what they did is create many other environments and racked up a bill more than well over six figures. So the
Oh wow.
idea was, to do maybe crypto mining or some type of crypto activities. Again, the more horsepower you have, not leveraging obviously your own funds, but in this case, more of for their own gain. So that's some of the trends that I see happening. The phishing, it will always be there. It's actually getting a lot more sophisticated. So a lot of these hackers are using unethical AI programs that they're building, just like we have, ChatGPT is a known one, and everybody's kind of building off that. Well, how do, again, the bigger question is how are we securing AI? Nobody's really talking about it, to be frank with you. But the ideas, and again, I have some ideas, but either way, the point is that I've gotten emails that look so legitimate from, an American Express or a huge, the Navy Federal. Again, I don't mean to say these names, but it's just giving you an idea that, like, it looks so legitimate that even if you check where it's coming from, it looks even more legit. But the idea is obviously in phishing, you have to check the URL, and there's other things that you can do to, more preventative. So the, again, the phishing is there. Scamming is up even more. I don't know if you're getting text messages, calls. I mean, it's getting really, really bad, to be honest with
Yeah,
Well,
the human element is just like it's the easiest one to break,
you.
right?
It's,
Um, so until we abstract people from the process of business,
of course.
it's just just chasing your tail constantly. But let me ask about the tenant thing. And you mentioned a couple of cloud service providers. One of the things that we've seen is that in cloud service providers, oftentimes when it's SaaS, it's a multi-tenant environment. So, threat actors will get into one organization's environment within the multi-tenant ecosystem and then move left and right into other companies' tenants. Was that a similar situation here, or was it a single tenant environment? Do you know?
Um, it was a single tenant
Okay.
environment, but again,
Hmm.
the good thing was they didn't mess with their um, environments or their servers and whatever they built. It was just they were trying to do something else,
Hmm.
which is nice, but in the sense bad that they racked up a bill, and then you have to go to the vendor to say, okay, well, I have to now see how I can fight this or
Oh,
cyber
I
insurance,
see.
right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yep, yep.
yeah, that is an
That's
interesting point. Well,
also
to Tim's, Verizon in their report, it was like 87%, if I remember correctly, of all data breaches are tied back to human error. So that human element just isn't going away. Uh, and we
Yes.
try lots of different technologies, a lot of different strategies, processes, you name it. Maybe it's minimized slightly, but it's still a problem, right? It's the weak link at the end of the day.
I've been
Maybe
in this.
maybe AI will solve that problem for us. Who knows, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the industry for 15 years, and just yesterday, I almost clicked the link. I almost clicked it, and I looked closer, and sure enough, it was a phishing email. Um, and I've seen every kind of training video you could possibly see, and I'm in the industry, so anybody who isn't, it's just easy. It's fish in a barrel for hackers, right? It's insane. It
Yep.
seems like the
Yep.
only way to almost get around it is locking down the business email environment to just authorized communication
You lock the fishers out.
streams.
Yeah.
Well, but no, it's interesting to Tim, to your point, right? Well, how do you lock down the workstations, right? How do you lock down organization-owned laptops, like lock down USBs, even using, let's say, a web filtering or proxy service, lock down all the sites that could, like gambling and the naughty sites, not going there. But my point is, like, not lock down specific things, or maybe go down to zero trust, to where they're basically a need to know and only access the sites, like human resources needing their accounting tools and software, right, to do the work in their job. And again, yeah, the employees browse the internet, and sometimes all it takes is just clicking on one site, and then you're downloading malware or ransomware into your networks, right? So I don't know,
Yeah.
more of like locking down.
Even, and I understand it inhibits productivity, but which is always the balance between security and IT innovation. But think of a scenario where for business, in email, you cannot receive emails and you cannot send emails who haven't been onboarded to people who haven't been onboarded and approved in the email system. Like that. Outside of that, I don't see true risk reduction, but it's almost untenable in terms of business innovation, and it just anyway.
Zero trust.
It could be a whole separate conversation here. I have ideas, but we don't have to get into it.
Okay, yeah.
Very good conversation.
That's the next podcast. You mentioned zero trust, which we did ask a question in the survey report on that front around the maturity levels organizations have. Include like endpoint, when you apply it to the network, when you apply it to data security, and so forth. And I think none of them were over 60%, or just maybe one or two were barely over 60%. Data security was the lowest, probably no big surprise, but that's the target of what cyber criminals are looking at, is how do I get to the crown jewels, to the sensitive content that these organizations have, so I can hold it for ransom, I can still use it for nation state issues and so forth. You guys are probably all at RSA, zero trust. Everyone claims to do it, but we still have organizations admitting that, about 60% of us are there, if even that. What are your thoughts, and what are your thoughts in regards to how we apply it to zero trust, or to content?
Well, I can jump on that. So the first thing is that a lot of marketing came around that make organization believe that they had what it takes to be zero trust. When they have just like the VPN with MFA and multi-attribute check, they say, okay, we're good, we're zero trust. But that's not the core. That's not how it's implemented. And that's not explained properly. I mean, zero trust is about knowing each item and attributing a rating for each data user, and then applying policies on top of that. So it's not just about remote access with multi-factor and conditional access stuff you see, but this is sold as this. So when you get a poll about organization adopting zero trust, I do not believe that number is there already, because to implement that thing, it's a big architectural change in the infrastructure. And to be honest, either you ramp up and move your information into a system that is natively implementing the process, but I barely see that fully implemented in any legacy system, even the cloud existing systems. It's not designed for it. It's getting there, but it's not there yet. So there is a lot of hype about zero trust. And if we get back to the first NIST definition, the NIST document, I mean, there is the policy enforcement point, the attribute based, and the risk level and risk rating that you apply to each document. And this is very aligned to the government requirement, the US. I mean, if you work in the federal acquisition requirement and the military stuff, this is something that exists for long, and it's not existing in the private sector. So there is a big catch up being played there. And between the marketing and stuff, it's like a false sentiment of security that is being deployed by solution provider coming with that, but it's not really the case. There is a big work of data classification and identification that you have to do before you can claim you have it in place. And it's not about deploying a box or whatever solution. It's about integrating a technology, but then you have to make it work with all your data. And this is all of it that is supposed to be under the regulation or the classification that you want to. So that's my take. I think there are two kind of zero trust, like the fancy thing in the marketing and the real accurate data governance that is applied to it.
Yeah,
the marketing people ruined it.
Yeah, exactly. We're starting. I mean, you may have seen, or maybe not, since it's Canada, but NIST, the NSA came out with zero trust, that the data pillar and really good concrete guidance, at least for federal agencies and companies doing business with federal agencies, about exactly what you said, which is least privilege access, always on monitoring, never trust, always verify at every data point, all of the assets. So that's a good direction. It's just for some reason we always go backwards in this industry. It's like we start with the machines and end with the data, but the machines were the reason you secure the machines, the network, and the applications is because of the data. Let's go the other way. I know it's a more complex problem, but it's the problem at the end of the day, outside of just sabotage, DDoS attacks.
I wonder, we had the interesting insight as we finally get to one of the points I wrote down here, which I figured would be the case. We had actually a little bit better than last year, like slightly by a couple percentage points, but 7+ data breaches on average reported by the 572 respondents we had. But then we this year, for the first time, I think we threw in don't know as one of the options, right? We had 1, we had 8, whatever's the case. And others, said just don't know. And these are IT, cybersecurity, risk, and compliance leaders. We had 9% overall say they don't know. And then in state, this is scary, in state government, 25% said they don't know, and 22% in pharmaceuticals said they don't know. So is this back to this, is it tied to the zero trust that they just really don't completely know what's going on in their environment? Because these folks should be aware of how many data breaches they experience, you would think, in the roles they're in. Alexandre, do you have any thoughts on that front?
Oh, yeah. I mean, clearly. But thing is that a lot of organizations learn about a breach from an external provider first. They don't see it because they do not have the audit log capability. They do not have the visibility, or they do not have the resource assigned to it. We spoke about the medical sector, healthcare. Well, these guys invest on healthcare stuff, medical equipment. So they are not information management companies. So it makes sense that the investment is going for the information security after the operational capability. Now, there is a switch when we lever and move everything digital, then we have to adjust. And the priority when the operational capability depends on the data, then it becomes as important, and we cannot ignore that thing. And I think we're just right now reaching that point where it's time to play catch up in many, many verticals. And that's a challenge we face because the threat actor didn't wait. The automation, the AI is used by the threat actor, and the security posture of this organization are not yet there. So, and there's no magical solution for that because it's a lot of work for anybody having been working in data classification equipment in an organization that didn't do it before. I mean, they have, let's say, a SharePoint stuff. And I'm telling you, when you have to pull that inventory of file in a CSV file and someone to actually tag each of them, well, you have now, automated pre-classification, you use AI for document. It's assuming some rating, but still you need a manual process to validate all these things. And that's taking a lot of time. So if organization didn't start with that, there's a lot of work to do. And this is a lot of cost. I mean, this is time on people or time on AI because we tend in that to bring more AI and automation. Yet you still have to do it. So that's the challenge we see. And it's not going to happen in a day.
Yeah, so very, very true. Ranbir, building on that, I wrote down the 2 industries that had the highest percentage of hacks. It was like 50% or more in both instances, I believe. Higher ed, it's like said they had 56% said they had over 7+ hacks. Security and defense was not far behind, which is a bit scary, because we have something called CMMC 2.0 that they're supposedly working to adhere to, but they apparently are still having a lot of hacks. Either they're more aware, at least these aren't the 2 that said they don't know most of the time, but there's a lot of attacks going on in that space. Is there a reason? Security and defense, obviously that's where, the most critical content's being stored, so I can understand why they're going after that. But higher ed, it's a immature technology space. Is that the reason?
Well, no, that this is all a great conversation that we're having, right? And to everyone's point on this call is where, I say, as secure as reasonably practical, right? Again, depending on the organization and industry, let's be honest here. If the federal government were to enforce cybersecurity to all entities like sole proprietorships, LLCs, S corps, C corps, it doesn't matter if you're federal or not, if you're a private-owned business. then our industry would be a complete game changer within the cybersecurity, because now, regardless of what industry you're in, you have to have some type of cybersecurity program or maybe resource. Here's, again, you brought up CMMC, right? So DoD, let's say, is enforcing it. I mean, 2019, and we're on 2024. So you could see how long the federal government takes to enforce a requirement. I mean, the
Yeah.
GovCons came back, hey, DoD, are you going to fund us for this? Because it was going to be a 6-figure tab. Even the smaller businesses, let's say 10 to 15 employees, just give you an example. So the idea is that, okay, yes, you have the controls, you have the policies, the procedures, but let's also be, another point I'm adding is that why does cybersecurity always have to continue selling themselves? Like the CISO has to sell himself daily or herself daily to just convince C-levels and board of directors the importance of this. And then, and I'm just really surprised that other companies are not catching on to say, okay, well, not just publicly traded companies, but folks in the Federal Trade Commission is another one. Again, they enforced cyber. What do mortgage broker dealer firms, payday loans, and car dealers know about cyber? They don't know what they don't know. So again, going back to your question, sorry, I'm all over the place, but higher ed, right? Where's the enforcement from the federal side or quasi enforcement saying, okay, well, all higher level education, colleges, universities, community colleges, training centers, you must have at least some minimum cybersecurity program in place, or even from strategic aligning back to NIST, right? And that's where the rub is right there for us to say, okay, well, we have these guides, these policies, procedures that go back to NIST that could easily be implemented, from a risk management perspective, right?
Yeah, there's a couple things there I want to springboard off of. One is in education. I mean, there's not a lot of money there to begin with, so it gets thinned out into priorities. And to your point, Ranbir, security doesn't make the cut to the degree that it should, especially in education, especially in state and local government. I mean, it's a little bit disturbing to hear it trend up in the federal government, but I get it. But I had this conversation just the other day. There's all these best practices, frameworks, how-tos, risk management 101s out there. But when it comes to pretty much directly to your point, it's not followed because there's no tangible or meaningful repercussion other than the potential for loss if you get breached. Whereas with, regulations that actually drive change, there's meaningful guaranteed repercussions for not following the situation. GDPR is one, although, there's some pencil sharpening that needs to be done there. But CMMC 2.0 is about the closest I've seen. And even there, it's not necessarily penalties. It's you'll lose the ability to do business with the federal government. Ergo, ipso facto, you will go out of business. That's a motivating regulation to adhere to, assuming it actually goes all the way through. But outside of that, everything's best practices, frameworks, and should do's, right? And it just, people got other things on there.
Well, yeah, no, and to your point, Tim, it's like, well, where's my return on investment? Or I call it ROSI, return on security investment. So we're at a point to say, okay, well, C-level and board of directors, maybe perhaps we show them a dollar value, the impact of a breach in your organization, if human resources or operations, or let's say your digital media group, or whichever departments or business units you have in your organization, the potential impact of breach and the outcome, right? But the idea is like, if you get breached, you will lose, you may potentially lose your clientele A, and your reputation goes down, right? Because a breach is, oh man, it's a big deal, and now it seems like it's sort of a norm thing too today. But the idea is that you could have put these preventative measures in place. Yes, it's going to cost you, but what if it costs you tenfold in the future, right? Even if you have cyber insurance, they're not going to cover, a $2 million ransomware. Look what happened to Colonial Pipeline. I mean, really, right? Again, It's an energy, oil company, and they're a big company. They got breached. I mean, it doesn't matter how big or small you are. They're just, the target is a target. It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, I think the challenge, the problem word in that statement is the first word, which is if
Yes.
you get breached, right? And when you're in the business seat, the board level, especially, almost the entire decision tree for all business operations is an if then statement, uh,
Yeah.
a balance of if thens, and this if falls lower than other ifs. If we do
Yeah.
this, we'll drive this much more business. Okay, that seems concrete. If we don't do this, we may lose. You see what I'm saying? But if there's when regulations change the if to an absolute, then action happens. I know people don't like regulations because it's like parenting, but I just don't see any other way to drive meaningful change at scale across industries, right?
Yeah, no, and sorry to be silly in a moment here, but I have a 2.5-year-old toddler. Every time I ask her to do something, she says no. So it's just it's like every time you ask the board something related to cyber, no. But again, it's like, okay, well, why don't we sort of think of it from an observation perspective where they're thinking about profits and losses, right? Because from a business perspective, you want your business to grow. You want to get more clients. You want to build that name and reputation even further. But that idea, if you sort of come from a different, especially CISOs, right? I think sometimes CISOs are either they're way too, and no offense, they're either way too technical or maybe more compliance, right? Or maybe the mix of the two. But the idea is, how do you show them numbers? Because then you'll get their attention within a matter of seconds, and they'll be like, okay, well, it could cost me $500,000 if my human resources department got breached. Yes. Okay, here's your funding that you need. Okay,
Yeah.
well, then that's a complete game changer. I don't know. That's just giving you some ideas here to maybe the whole industry is going about it wrong, where, okay, we have these 20 critical CVEs and now they have to be addressed, right? I don't know about you, but a board of directors, C-levels usually get very turned off by that and they walk away. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's something you see. I mean, Tim, you spoke about GDPR, and that's exactly the spirit they came with. I mean, if you breach, and there is a big key notion there, which is negligence. If you've been negligent, you are guilty and you will be fined. That's
Yeah.
either a couple of millions or a percentage of your annual income
Yeah.
of the company. So that's actually something that exists and is in place. Tim, you said we need a regulation. Well, it's there in some places, but the issue is the enforcement of it.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
we see is that they come after the fact. They come, okay, big corporation, big enough to be worth investigating, getting the money from, then it will slap them after the incident. And the same rule has been taken and the laws into Quebec laws here in Canada. And that's exactly the same thing because they want it to be on an equal requirement for the market. So we face the same thing. But the fact is, there is no one to enforce it. So you run your SMB, no one's going to go after you. You're not going to be fined. No one is going to be, unless there is a claim or someone suing you
Yeah.
for because you abused the PII or something, or you stole the information, or there is a big thing eating the news, and then you're going to have some fine. But and we face Ranbir, what you said about the board members. If you speak about it, they're like, yeah, well, who's going to check that? so
right.
so I mean,
100%.
what's the lever? What's the lever? What
Yeah,
can we do?
But trust me, we all feel the heartburn here. We're like, we really want to make an impact. We really want to put these I mean, it's like sort of the boy cried wolf scenario, right? The boy keeps crying wolf, and then the townspeople come. You're like, and then eventually the wolf comes and eats him, right? So the idea is like, why not? Why not put preventative measures in place now versus the future if something were to happen? It's kind of like insurance, right? Like, and again, I don't know about Alexandre in Canada, but in US, you're required to get car insurance before you go drive on the road. And if you don't, and you get pulled over, you'll get a huge ticket, even jail time. So the idea is, if we were to apply, and again, not applying jail time in cyber, but to companies, hey, if you don't implement these things, then you may get fined, right? The SEC, DOD, and DOD is more of like, hey, you can lose money in going after contracts because your score is so low, right? FTC is still, those industries don't understand cyber because nobody's pushing it. And obviously, and that it was just so random that FTC came out and did this, right? And then SEC is like the breach reporting, right? Okay, well, are those public traded companies, actually doing something to improve their cyber posture? I have no idea.
Yeah,
I think Alexandre's right because you have. Go ahead, Tim.
Oh, just to close off on this point, because otherwise I'll lose my train of thought. Is it's you must do this. If you don't, here's the penalty, and here's how we'll enforce it.
Yeah.
It's like that. To Alexandre's point, the last part is missing. My point is a lot of times the middle part is missing, and the first part is only a general recommendation right now, by and large.
And it's, I think, being applied to the larger organizations, like Alexandre said. If you look at the fine data from GDPR this past year, it went up exponentially. I think it was exceeded all the fines issued in 19, 20, and 21, if I remember correctly. But the amount of the fine went up a huge amount, like tenfold, if I remember the data. And that means they're probably focusing on the bigger breaches, the bigger organizations, and everyone else is sort of sliding by because the administrators of these compliancy programs are focused on just the big names. So I'm not sure it's driving the behavior we want to see. And we saw that in the report findings that tie it back to the report, where 11% said they need no improvement when it comes to their compliance work in terms of how they measure and manage sensitive content communications, which is the same as last year. So I don't know that we see improvement there. 43%, and when we start looking at causes, said they can actually track and control, and it's probably lower than that. Some may think they can, and they really can't track and control content once it leaves their organization. And then you looked at the industries, and guess what? Higher ed, 14% said they could. They were the worst. Federal government, which is promising, probably because of the regulations that they have in place there, was the best. They said 59 at a rate of 59%. Do you guys, keeping it on the topic of this idea of cost, we did look at specifically the idea of litigation costs, because you look at the IBM report that comes out annually, and that has brand impact and operational impact and et cetera, et cetera. That ongoing litigation cost that organizations must expend, not only the cost, but just the resources and the fact that it's wear and tear on your organization over a period of time, it was quite high. We had over 50% say they spend over $5 million, I believe, or somewhere in that vicinity, in litigation cost alone associated with data breaches. Is that often underplayed in many organizations? They we're going to deal with brand impact, we're going to deal with the operational issues, we're going to, if we have to pay ransom, we'll pay ransom. But then, the ongoing litigation costs that are tied to some of the compliance regulations, they sort of don't realize the full impact of those until 2 or 3 years into a breach. They're still dealing with litigation associated with it. What's your sense, Alexandre? Let's start with you, and then we get Ranbir's thoughts as well.
Yeah, I mean, funnily, while it's a formal risk management thing, it looks like organization didn't take it seriously. And we now see, because it's been a crazy rush, like in the 5 past years, and we see now the outcome and the lawsuit still wrapping up. We see some settlement about abuse and breaches and stuff in the news now. So it started to ring a bell, but it seemed like it was like buried, like they didn't think it will bring that stuff, or it was like just marketing, because to be honest, every cybersecurity company is like brand impact, economical impact, your market is going to suffer a little bit, but everybody says that. So everybody's like, yeah, marketing stuff, and now we start to see it. So, but just for the big names. So I think there is a lot of road to get that down to all the SMBs, because the big names is one thing, but the economical market is made of SMBs. And these are the core, just the big name. They're big, but this is just a small part of it. Funny, not financially, but on the operational side. So for that to reach SMBs, there is a lot of work. I think we might need, a cyber police, like they come after you to review the taxes. You didn't declare the taxes right, So maybe annual review of the cybersecurity stuff is going to change. Like randomly, you be picked, and they're going to check if you have the control in place. And then if you don't, align with the regulation, then boom, fine or consequences or whatever. That could be something. I don't know. I don't want to be a police state, but if we come with regulation, maybe that's something that we need, a consequence.
Spot checks. Ranbir, what are your thoughts when it comes to the litigation cost? Do organizations often underestimate, the long-term impact of data breaches?
Absolutely, 1,000%. But it's not just litigation, right? What's the cost of the amount of customers or clients they lost? That's another cost. What's the cost of downtime? Because let's say you're down, your systems are down, right? Let's say you average $100,000 a day if you're a really big company. I'll just give you an example, right? So you're not incorporating all these other costs, not just on top of litigation. Now, an idea just sprung in my head. Well, why aren't CISOs taking that information and breaking the cost down? Like, let's say, and again, I know a lot of companies don't advertise this, but you can sort of kind of guesstimate, to say, okay, well, a lawyer charges like $500 to $1,000 an hour. Okay, fine. And then you get breached and then cyber insurance. And again, there's a lot of costs associated with it and there's a lot of moving pieces, but you can show the data to, let's say, the C-levels and board of directors so they understand that, hey, this could be the impact. Because it's like Tim said earlier, if, then when, then okay, now what do we do now? So the idea is you show the numbers. That's what we're forgetting in our field sometimes, because the numbers are on the Verizon report, and CrowdStrike is another one, right? They come out with their reports, but again, data is only as good as the information provided by the leaders, right? And they may or may not be accurate, but again, it's more of a guesstimate, right? Versus, okay, well, every single organization, right, they are going to at one point experience attack, or they've already been attacked. We have to say, okay, litigation, yes, that's a piece of it, but we also have to show that to, let's say, the C-levels board of directors, and so they can understand, hey, these companies, this is what happened, this is what it potentially could have cost them. Do we really want to be there? And it's not a scare tactic. It's just saying, why don't we be smart and put these prevent and give us the, 7-figure budget we're asking for, so we can not just technology, but get the resources and get the right resources, right? Sometimes you hire some resources, they say they may have the experience and they don't, but again, this happens all the time. But the point is, like, okay, find the right candidates and build an effective cybersecurity program in place, right? Not just technology.
Have you ever seen anybody, Ranbir, boil it down to something as simple as a thesis statement? For every $1 we spend on cybersecurity, we keep $5 in the bank account.
I've never heard that, but you should copyright that.
It's just like,
or maybe be one of your promotions.
PhD algorithm you're going to create, Ranbir.
Yeah, it's one page. For every dollar you spend on cybersecurity, your company keeps $5 in the bank.
That's a great marketing tactic, just even for you guys. Kiteworks, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Start having your sales folks.
I'm like George Costanza. So I said something smart. I'm out.
No, but on a real note, like that's the amazing statement to say from a thesis standpoint, because they're like, clients then they'll be like, oh, I didn't think of it that way, right? I don't know. It's funny.
Yeah. Well, we're about out of time. I had one more area I wanted to get everyone's thoughts on. We did some interesting cross analysis of various questions, and we asked, how many tools do you have in place? How many third parties do you exchange information with that's sensitive, annually? And then we analyze that across the number of breaches that organizations have, as well as back to that litigation cost issue. And lo and behold, this probably is not a big surprise. It's like 350% higher the more tools you have in place. Those that are up at the top, where they say we have 10 plus tools in place and we communicate with over 2,500 third parties, their litigation costs were exponentially higher than their peers, and the number of breaches they experienced was also a lot higher. Well, this is probably no surprise to you, Tim, being at Kiteworks. We talk to clients all the time where this plays out. But what are your thoughts on this front, and how do you mitigate that, right? It's all right, you communicate with 5,000 third parties a day. You want to lower your risk. How do you do that?
You ask me?
Well, go ahead, Alexandre. I was asking Tim, but He's
yeah.
looking at me.
Oh,
Okay, go ahead, Tim.
I'll tell you how you don't do it. You don't send out a security questionnaire, get it filled out, and then feel confident in the results.
You're covered.
Yeah. That's how you don't do it to any degree of value. Yeah, but I mean, it's a loaded question, right? I mean, you have to maintain control of your sensitive data no matter where it goes, internally and externally, and that's a very hard thing to do. I do know a way to do it, but
Go ahead, Alexander. You're about to answer it, I think. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, it's about the expansion of the attack surface. When you speak about the requirement and the compliance requirement that you have to apply, the more you expand your attack surface, which means your stack, how many tools you use, how many partners, the more you have to work and the more you need security controls. It means that the biggest amount of things you have to watch. And we speak about, alert fatigue or how tired our security teams. But that's for sure. If you have a nightmare of fireworks of solution all around the organization, that's unmanageable. So you have to consolidate. And I mean, I'm publicly against monoculture, so it doesn't mean that you have to stick with just one provider or one method. It means that you have to control your stack and bring solution that will allow to have the audit visibility and the capability to provide the security control in a formal way that will give you that at least vision of what's happening. Because what we see in the report is like, they don't know, it's like people, they don't know if they've been breached and we see that all the time. So if you consolidate per tool, let's say the file sharing side of things, I mean, you need to be able to control what happened when the thing is out. And that's not happening if you drop your sensitive or control content in a third-party solution, because as soon as you drop it, that's over. It could be copied or whatever. You don't know what's happening. So, and I mean, there is the contract, the boundaries that cover that side of things, but it doesn't always happen. So the more you control and the further you keep control on that, and the more you provide your partner and providers, customers, the solution to collaborate with you, the less risk you take. So basically, you have to be like a long arm as far as you can hold your stuff, because that's the only way you're going to keep control of that, and it's going to match your requirements. So that will be my take.
Another great point. And the fewer tools you have, the easier it is to consolidate your logs into something that can be monitored, can be managed, can be reported on. Ranbir, do you have thoughts on that front? We certainly saw that one interesting answer to one of the questions was like 5 to 10%, depending on the industry and so forth, said when we asked, how much time do you spend consolidating your logs into something that's actionable that you can actually, and like 5 to 10% said, can't do it. It's just not possible. We have too many sensitive content communication tools that we use in our organization. They don't talk to each other. It doesn't matter how many resources we throw at it. It just isn't possible. Getting that into one stream and consolidating down your tools so it's manageable would seem to be, if you're looking to reduce risk, that's one of those check boxes that you should check off.
Yeah, no, this is a great conversation. I always say a tool is but a tool in the sense that, yes, there's many tools out there, right? My concern, at least when I put my cyber hat on, is where is my data actually being transported, right? Because MSPs is a big one, right? Now they're reselling just different vendor names. Okay, where's that vendor storing my data, my backups, my monitoring? Again, yes, they're the big name Microsoft. You can one-stop shop off. They offer all of the tools that are different brands and names. Fine. Again, I'm just giving you an example. I'm not saying I'm for or against. I'm just giving you the example that you can consolidate all of that stuff. So maybe you have better insight of where your data is being stored. I don't care what you tell me. When you say cloud, it's still stored on physical gear monitored by a big name vendor. Well, how are they protecting my data? Do they actually tell you? I mean, you can ask and like, oh, maybe we're SOC 2 type 2. And again, it doesn't have to be a big name vendor. It's just saying, okay, where's my data physically being stored? If it is on some physical device that has hard drive, that has memory through shared resources and software, which we all forgotten sometimes, and we can go back. I'm dating myself here, but remember the days of having a network, you having physical servers, firewalls, managed by the organization. And obviously, because of the pricing and moving over to cloud, I think it's actually more expensive to go cloud now because you pay per minute, per second. It can get very, very expensive, real fast, real quick, especially if you don't know what you're doing. But the idea is, why are we also revisiting how these cloud instances are being built, like with the layer of virtual LAN segmentation, right? And firewalls, again, not to get more technical, but it goes back to say, okay, well, we have all these tools, we have all these different vendors, but where's my data being stored? And I think that's the rub to say, okay, well, maybe when the breaches happen, because the organization doesn't know that maybe their data is going onto some island or some international waters. You don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
Great points. Tim, any final thoughts? This has been a great conversation. The report has a lot more data than what we discussed today. So I encourage your audience to go to kiteworks.com, go to resources, and go to the annual survey report tab and check it out. It's not gated, and we have some supplemental resources that are available along with the full report. But Tim, any final thoughts?
No, I think just to your point again, that on the report that there's a lot of breach reports. It's endless. This is one of the few that looks at the third-party ecosystem, the information supply chain, and the data layer. So, it's the broadest attack surface out there. So it's good to have some intelligence there. And yeah, Alexandre and Ranbir, thanks a lot for joining us and talking about this today. It was an enjoyable conversation.
Yeah,
Likewise.
absolutely. Thanks, guys. For our audience, if you're interested in other Kitecast episodes, go to kiteworks.com/Kitecast.